Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Girivara Dhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachadi Jamunatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachadi Jamunatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Harividagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi. This is my third time here? Something like that? Fourth time? Maybe. Certainly recognize the little different in different seasons too. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing this evening with Canto 10, Chapter 12. And the topic is the killing of the Aghasura demon. We just met him. He's a pretty formidable person. The shape of a giant serpent 8 miles long, with his jaw in the clouds and his lower jaw on the ground with big fangs that look like mountain peaks. We heard the cowherd boys. The first part of the chapter is they're going out to play. They're herding calves, but they're really not herding calves. They're just playing, and the calves tag along. And they're doing this and that and the other, and the childish activities are described. Sakhas, they're called. It's a certain category of relationship of friendship with Krishna. And it means they just play. That's what it means. And Krishna enjoys transcendental happiness, not just by playing, but because of their love for him. And part of the unlimited Supreme Lord is childhood pastimes, very, very sweet. And so this and that, the other thing is what they do is described. And then in the course of describing all that, Shukadeva Goswami throws his hands in the air and says, who can say how fortunate these boys are? So some very important verses. Very important verses. Those who are jnanis, those who are yogis, those who are bhaktas, and those who are materialists, different categories of personalities are described, and what their realization is. It's just a small part of what Krishna is. Even the Bhagavan feature, it's surpassed by the intimacy of the love of the cowherd boys, and not just the cowherd boys, all the residents of Vrindavan. He just starts jumping up and down, very ecstatically describing the good fortune of the residents of Vrindavan to have that intimate association where they can directly see him, play with him for the cowherd boys, feed him from the parents, etc., etc. All the different relationships. It happens in a number of places, but it's where he gets just really ecstatic and just expresses his joy, because he's an ecstatic devotee. He's a very good narrator of Krishna's pastimes, and he's feeling something as he's narrating. Following that, there's a mood. Ataha, so it's next. The next episode is they're in this joyful, frolicsome, playful mood. They find this giant entity thing on the path. And they start wondering, is it a cave? Is it just a statue? What is it? And then they reach the conclusion, it's a serpent. And so some boys are afraid, and the other boys say, no, you don't have to be afraid. See, Krishna's right there. He's seeing us, and we have nothing to fear, because even Baka tried to capture us in his mouth, and Krishna finished him. So anyway, we're curious. Let's see what's inside this big cave. And the second was, they want to have the experience once again of Krishna's having a good time, saving us, rescuing us. Let's go. So off they go into the mouth of the Aghasura demon, and the calves with their tails in the air go chasing after the cowherd boys into the mouth of the Aghasura demon. It's 8-mile-long serpent. He doesn't close his mouth yet. He's waiting for Krishna. So that's the storyline where we are. And before we continue, I wanted to go back to something that happened with earlier chapters where we discussed the significance of Krishna's killing of demons in Braja. So both Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta wrote things about it. You know who they are, right? Bhaktisiddhanta, Prabhupada's spiritual master, and his father Bhaktivinoda. Yeah. Okay. So there's a month-long seminar taught in Vrindavan at the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, and what I'm going to read is taken directly from their manual for students to attend that course. So I'm reading directly. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita, quote, Sri Krishna's activities are of two distinct types, namely, Nitya, or eternal, and Naimitika, or occasional. In Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna's Nitya Leela, or eternal pastimes, are conducted throughout 8 periods of the day. So during different periods of the day, there's a certain mood and a certain set of pastimes, and then that changes, and then there's another mood, and 8 phases of the day for the 24 hours. And then it's a rerun, at least the phases, and then there's variegated pastimes within those. His manifesting his spiritual pastimes in this world. Nitya Leela. So that's in Krishna Loka. And they are constantly in motion. But in Bhoma Vrindavan, Krishna's Nitya Leela is mixed with the Naimitika Leela, or occasional pastimes, like some spice with a sabji. Some occasional pastimes include, so here's some examples. Krishna's leaving Vrindavan to live in Mathura and then in Dwarka. He doesn't leave Vrindavan. In Goloka, he doesn't, Krishna Loka, he doesn't leave. But there's a pastime of his leaving. You'll hear some more. His returning to Braja, his killing of various demons and so forth, like the birth pastime. It's another example. Naimitika, occasional. These pastimes are very useful for an aspiring devotee, that's us, who is bound within the material world. The Naimitika Leela, or occasional pastimes of leaving Braja, actually exist in Goloka, Vrindavan, or Krishna Loka, but only in a conspicuously absent manner. What's that mean? It means that there's a bhava, but there's no physical, or there's no event where Krishna leaves Vrindavan. There's a feeling or a mood, a transcendental ecstasy of it, but the pastime doesn't take place there. Elsewhere it says, not in this paragraph, but elsewhere it says, when he performs his pastimes once in a day of Brahma, it's to reinforce with these eternal associates of Krishna, yes, he leaves Vrindavan, or yes, Mothers Yashoda or Vasudeva and Devaki give birth to Krishna. So there's a pastime that reinforces that bhava that's conspicuously absent in the Leela form in the spiritual world. Clear? Okay, great. So they actually exist in Goloka Vrindavan, but only in a conspicuously absent manner, semicolon. They are truly manifest only in the material world. So Krishna ascends and performs his pastimes. Practicing devotees, or sadhakas, again that's us, understand these occasional pastimes to be like, interesting language, negatively tinted reflections of the eternal pastimes. So it's, we have glass that's tinted, color tinted, blue or something, and this is negatively tinted. And it's not just transparent or translucent, it's a reflection. Interesting language, huh? I mean, it's probably written in Bengali. It's somebody translated into English, negatively tinted reflections of the eternal pastime. So It's a pastime in the spiritual realm, but not being manifest, but it's a mood and thus a pastime. And here it's negatively tinted reflection. It actually takes place of that which is conspicuously absent, but there's a mood of it in the spiritual realm. There's a connection, in other words. And such sincere devotees, that's all of you, sincere devotees, hope that by the influence of understanding the purpose of Krishna's performance of different occasional pastimes, their own various anarthas, or unwanted material contaminations, will be destroyed. Yay! So that's a purpose. There's a purpose of the pastimes. The purpose of trying to understand the pastime is to get on the other side of the obstacles on our path of bhakti. Paragraph. Just cut and paste from their manual for the course. In the above mentioned book, that was just quoting Bhaktivinoda. In the above mentioned book, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained how the demons Lord Krishna killed in Vrindavan represent the main obstacles facing the aspiring devotee. So if you don't have any obstacles, then you don't need to hear all this. But if you do, it's helpful to hear it. If, by the Lord's grace, these demons can be killed in various ways, that's what's inside, the demons inside, or the obstacles inside, they may manifest themselves in ways they may manifest themselves in our lives, and our progress in devotional service is guaranteed. So what's the idea? And I'll say it rather than just reading it. There's perfected souls, and then there's worldly people, and then there's those that are trying to go on the path of bhakti to move towards purification. And for us, there is a special significance of Krishna's killing the demons in Vrindavan, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's not allegorical. There are obstacles on our path, and there's really lengthy descriptions of, don't make the mistake of thinking Krishna's pastimes are allegorical, and this means that, and the other thing means something else, and it's not allegorical. It's a pastime where Krishna is helping to do two things. He's helping the devotees experience bliss. That's what he's doing. And pritranaya sadhunam and vinashaya chaduskritam. He's doing those things. And for those of us that are somewhere in between, it's demonstrating his willingness to help us overcome an obstacle that we are facing, and on our own we don't seem to be overcoming that obstacle, but Krishna will help us overcome the obstacle. And his dismissing of the demons is an indication of Krishna's willingness to do that. And there's a potency in just hearing the narration. There's potencies in Krishna's names. We hear that from Lord Chaitanya. Nija Sarva Shaktis. Nija Sarva Shaktis. All spiritual potencies are within each and every one of his names. And then certain names, they carry special potency. Like, let's say Rishikesh means the master of the senses. So when Arjuna addresses Krishna as Rishikesh, the name is invoking a certain capacity within the unlimited Krishna to control our senses. Or Yogeshwara, master of all mystic powers. So each name carries with it a certain efficacy or potency, power. And by the name there's a certain power, by the pastime there's a certain power. The pastime of helping us overcome obstacles that are inside or in our lives as we're practicing. So here's some explanations. There's 4 of them, where we'll start with Chaitanya Shikshamrita, because that was the one referenced. Killing of the demon Aghasura symbolizes removal of the sinful activities of violence towards living entities and torturing others due to hatred. So that's like a big one. It's probably not so much of a problem for most devotees. Sinful activities of violence towards living entities. That's so in Krishna Samhita, the other book where Bhaktivinoda writes about this, Aghasura is the personification of intolerance and cruelty. There's an interesting point. Due to lack of compassion for the living entities, if that condition exists, there is a possibility that one's spiritual attachment will gradually diminish, because compassion cannot remain separated from spiritual attachment. The basis of compassion for the living entities and one's devotion to Krishna is the same. So if you have devotion to Krishna, you have compassion for others. If you don't have compassion for others, it's going to diminish your devotion to Krishna. They go together. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says something quite similar in a book that he wrote called Sri Krishna. And I'm reading from his writing. Aghasura epitomizes cruelty and violence. It is possible for love to suffer gradual decay by the absence of kindness for all animate beings. This must be so, inasmuch as kindness can never be a different principle from love for Krishna. Love for Krishna and compassion go together. If you weak in one area, you're going to be weak in the other area. If you're strong in love for Krishna, you'll be strong in compassion for, or kindness for, all living beings, all animate beings. There is no substantive difference between love for Krishna and kindness to individual souls, which makes sense because they're both spiritual. The bodily covering may be what the bodily covering is. And kindness doesn't mean you go and embrace a tiger, but it means kindness. And the expression of kindness is appropriate for the soul, the soul's embodiment, their situation. But a disposition of kindness towards the soul, and thus all living entities, with appropriate way of expressing that. And then this other is from their VIHE, that's the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, causing trouble to others out of envy. That's an obstacle for some on the path of bhakti. There's an interesting description in a book called Garga Samhita. Garga Samhita was spoken by Gargamuni. Gargamuni is the person who did the name-giving ceremony for Krishna and Balaram, Gargamuni. So it's Garga Samhita. And in Garga Samhita, there's a description of a visit that Narada made to King Bahulashva. If you've read Krishna book or 10th canto, towards the very end of Krishna's Dwaraka pastimes, Krishna's feeling, there's this in Mithila. So Mithila is the kingdom where King Janak ruled. So from the time of King Janak, the king was known as the king of Mithila. There's a long story about that. And so Krishna went to go visit King Bahalashva because he was very busy with his kingly duties. He never had the chance to be with Krishna, so Krishna went to him. There's a whole chapter. And Krishna took a whole assembly of people, not a whole army, but many ministers and a whole entourage. And he visited other devotees and other devotees on the way. He was giving his association to his devotees for the ultimate purpose of going to visit King Bahalashva. It's really nice. Bahalashva had in his kingdom, had a very elevated Brahmin named Shrutadev. And when they came to greet Krishna just outside the city, they both came before him and both made the request, come and take a meal at our home. And so what is Krishna going to do? If he says one to the one, then he's going to disappoint the other. So he just expanded himself into two Krishnas. He went to both places. Very practical. No one was disappointed. So this is King Bahalashva, and King Bahalashva is visited by Narada. And they're discussing Krishna. It's just recorded, it's spoken by Gargamuni, and so I'm just going to read. It's a description that says, who was Aghasura in his previous life? That's what the conversation is about. After hearing the sage Narada's words, Bahalashva, the king of Mithila, spoke. The king said, who was this demon in his previous birth that he was able to enter Lord Krishna's abode? Simply by hating him, this demon quickly attained Lord Krishna. Narada said, O king, he was Shankachuda's son. So, if you read Krishna book, then you'll know who Shankachuda is. Shankachuda is described, it's 10th canto Bhagavatam. He's a follower of Kuvera, very, very wealthy follower of Kuvera, and very, very beautiful in feature, exquisitely beautiful. And he had a turban with a fantastic jewel on top of his turban. So the pastime in the 10th canto is Krishna and Balaram were with gopis in the evening hour, and they were enjoying pastimes together, and Krishna was beginning to play his flute, and as Krishna was beginning to play his flute, along comes Shankachuda, looking at these little boys like, insignificant village boys, and there's these beautiful girls. So he got a stick. He had a stick, and he didn't hit them with the stick, but he was forcing them to go in the direction of Mathura. And they were afraid of Shankachuda, and they called out to Krishna for help. And Krishna and Balaram came running. And Shankachuda saw them running and saw there was like time and death running after him. So he dropped his stick and he left the gopis and running for his life, and Krishna caught him and smacked him. End of Shankachuda, follower of Kuvera. So Shankachuda had a son. And he didn't have a nice name for his son. He named him Agha. But that was, anyway, his name was Agha. He was young, strong, and very handsome. He was like another Kamadev. When he saw the disfigured sage Ashtavakramuni, bent in 8 places, that's what his name means. So he started laughing at him. Agha laughed and said, who is this ugly person? So the sage cursed Agha. Oh, wicked-hearted one, you will become a snake. You will be the ugliest snake in the circle of the earth. Seeing that the demon, his pride and arrogance now gone, had fallen at his feet, the sage became pleased with him and gave him a benediction. Shri Ashtavakra. It says Ashtavakra said, Sri Krishna, who is more handsome than many millions of Kamadevas, will enter your stomach. Then you'll be free from having a snake's form. By Ashtavakra's curse, Aghasura became a snake, and by Ashtavakra's blessing, Aghasura attained liberation. A liberation even the demigods cannot attain. So that's from Garga Samhita. So now we're going to go to the pastime, and I hope your anarthas become loosened just by hearing this nice story. So Canto 10, Chapter 12, Text 25 reads, The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is situated as Antaryami, the super soul in the core of everyone's heart, heard the boys talking among themselves about the artificial python. Unknown to them, it was actually Aghasura, a demon, who had appeared as a python. Krishna, knowing this, wanted to forbid his associates to enter the demon's mouth. Now, Prabhupada translated that verse. There's no purport, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, Hearing the boys discuss about the real snake as if it were something else, Krishna began to think, quote, What is really a snake's mouth? They are thinking is some scenic part of Vrindavan, not a snake's mouth. This is not just a snake, but the demon, called Aghasura. Question. How did Krishna know this? Because he is situated in everyone's heart. Akila bhuta hrit stitaha. As Paramatma, knowing everything, he then decided to prevent them from entering. Jiva Goswami's commentary to this verse 25. Similar. Hearing the speech of his friends, who were acting like ignorant people, hearing that speech which was false, since truly the gaping mouth of the snake shone with brilliance in Vrindavan, and knowing it was not only a python, but the Rakshasa named Agha, since he was in everyone's heart as Paramatma, was the inspiration for all things, and was endowed with all powers, he wanted to prevent them. And there's reference to this verse, so it's 10, 12, 25, spoken of all places in the Rasalila section, which comes much later, chapter 31. So it's the gopis speaking to Krishna. Oh, greatest of personalities, you have repeatedly saved us from all kinds of danger, from poisoned water, the Kaliya serpent, from the terrible man-eater Agha, from the wind mixed with rains, and the fiery thunderbolt of Indra, the Govardhan Lila, from Vatsasura, which took place in childhood, and from Vyomasura, which hasn't taken place yet. So, commentary reads, that was a verse, 10:31:3, Gopi speaking. We have been protected by you as part of your general protection of Braja and by protection of individuals, but you do not remember that it is improper to cut down a poisonous tree. Do you not remember that it is improper to cut down a poisonous tree when it is growing? You protected the cows and cowherds from death when they drank its poisoned water at Kalya Lake. You protected us from Aghasura, the snake Rakshasa, for it was said, and this evening's verse, Krishna, full of all powers, who was situated as Antaryami in the core of everyone's heart, heard the boys talking falsely amongst themselves like ignorant people, considering that truly a snake was beautifying Vraja, and knowing moreover that it was a Rakshasa, he wanted to prevent them from entering the demon's mouth. So the gopis are making reference to this. You protected us from Agha, who swallowed up the calves and boys. We were protected by your protecting all the living entities of Braja. Protection of individuals that affect everyone is indicated in these examples. You protected us from the wind mixed with rain, including hail, and from lightning by lifting Govardhan. This is protection of everyone. You protected us from Vatsasura, who appeared to be a calf, but upon being killed took the form of a huge bull. You protected us from Vyomasura, parentheses, which will be described later, though it took place when Krishna was younger. What that means is the cowherd boys didn't talk about Vyomasura till later. It happened when he was younger. But when they went, because the general program was, after he would kill the demon, they would, yay, and they'd sing songs about Krishna did this, and they're herding the calves, playing and singing songs. And then they got back to the village, and the parents would go, what did Krishna do today? And they'd sing their song, and then the parents would make their own songs. And they was just having a blast. They're having a nice festival, just singing and glorifying Krishna. That was their life. So the pastime with Vyomasura, for some reason, it doesn't say why, they didn't disclose that one until then it came up later. He disclosed it. Okay, so these pastimes indicate protection of individuals as protection of all. This is like the story of Varaha killing Hiranyaksha. It is narrated out of sequence in the third canto, though it took place during Chakshusha Manvantar. What does that mean? It's a technical thing. In each day of Brahma, there's 14 manus. Right? Each day of Brahma, 14 manus. And Lord Varaha appears twice during each day of Brahma. There's this very elaborate listing given by Rupa Goswami in his writing Laghu Bhagavatamrita. Most of the demons appear only once. Most of the forms of the Lord appear only once, and there are some exceptions. Once in a day of Brahma, and one of those exceptions is Varaha, and he appears during the Vaivasvata Manu and appears during the Chakshusha Manu. So Manu number 4 and Manu number 7, to keep it simple. So Krishna's pastimes are taking place during Vaivasvata Manu, the 28th Yuga cycle of the Vaivasvata Manu. So he's just making a detailed point that just like in the narration of Varaha, it's out of sequence because it's not told in sequence. However, because the pastimes of the Lord are ecstatic, they're taken together as if it's one entity, because the main point is protecting people from fear. So the gopis are expressing to Krishna his kindness to not only them, to all the Brijbasis, for protecting the Brijbasis, individuals as well as collectively, from fear. And from Krishna's point of view, we're going to hear tomorrow morning, when he does things like that, incidental is the killing of the demon and primary is giving bliss to the devotees. So, earlier in this chapter, this is chapter 12, before Aghasura appears, the cowherd boys are playing and playing and playing, and if there's not an interruption in their playing, they'll just keep playing. They're not going to stop for lunch. You know what kids are like. So by the influence of Yogamaya, Aghasura came to interrupt their playing so they could stop and have lunch. Because the main thing is bliss. The blissful, the sweetness of Braja eclipses his divinity, or his opulence, or his Aishvarya feature. So the main, and then there's secondary, and then there's just incidental. So our acharyas describe the killing of demons as incidental. We call the whole chapter the killing of the Aghasura demon. It's incidental. The essential is the pastime, including the happiness of the cowherd boys seeing Krishna display his power. They go, yay, that was really good, let's have lunch. It's just part of the stimulation of their love for Krishna. It's not an awesome, who is he? The parents do that sometimes. Parental affection. Who is this boy? Okay, so we're continuing with another section of commentary. This is Jiva Goswami in the final Sandarbha called Priti Sandarbha, and it starts off by speaking about Lord Ramachandra. Priti Sandarbha is describing the varieties of loving feeling. That's the perfectional stage of devotional life. So he starts with describing a verse from Ramayana. A verse from Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 10, Ram's pastimes with Sita. 9, 10, 11. That's the verse. Canto 9, Chapter 10, Text 11. When Sita was stolen by the wolf-like Ravana in the forest, in Ram's absence, Ram, feeling separation from his wife, like a suffering man, wandered in the forest with his brother, announcing to the world the result of association with women. And it's here's the BBT translation. It's similar. When Ramachandra entered the forest and Lakshmana was also absent, the worst of the Rakshasas, Ravana, kidnapped Sita Devi, the daughter of the king of Videha, just as a tiger seizes unprotected sheep when the shepherd is absent. Then Lord Ramachandra wandered in the forest with his brother Lakshmana, as if very much distressed due to separation from his wife. This is Prabhupada's translation. Thus he showed, by his personal example, the condition of a person attached to women. Though into commentary, Jiva Goswami, he's explaining how to understand that properly. Though internally Rama was controlled by prema, externally he announced the result for persons who freely associate with women by performing actions of indifference. That is, going off alone, then she got kidnapped, and so on. At the end of the chapter, it is said, this Canto 9, Chapter 10, ends, by her character and her love and service, by submissiveness, shyness, and fear, understanding the love of her husband, Sita attracted the mind of the Lord. In the next chapter, Jiva Goswami writes, it is said, so 9th Canto, chapter 11. After hearing the news of Mother Sita's entering the earth, the Supreme Lord Rama, though capable of checking his grief by intelligence, on remembering her good qualities, he could not do so, though he was the Lord. Commentary reads, while internally indicating that he was happy with special bhakti, and that he was controlled by prema for Sita, he created detachment in ordinary people by externally showing indifference to actions of material kama or lust. So again, chapter 11, this is just after hearing that Sita's entered the earth. Such attraction between man and woman is a cause of samsara, even for Brahma and others in this life and the next, what to speak of the common people who are attached to their houses. In Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, our acharyas teach, he was so absorbed in the pastimes of sweetness that he didn't fulfill another one of his purposes, that is, giving teachings, dharma sangstha, panartaya. So when he left and went to Mathura and then further to Dwaraka and then further Bhagavad Gita and other places, this feature of giving teachings became more prominent. And in the case of Ram, it's also prominent. The sweetness is everything. His love for Sita is transcendental. It's not worldly in any way. And she is not worldly in any way, and he's not, and their relation is not. So at the same time, he's teaching by his example different things, and this section just happens to emphasize the teaching for worldly people of undue attachment on the material platform to home, wealth, male-female attachments. It's when it's in the position of excessiveness, it brings great difficulty to somebody. So he goes on. Having two meanings is proper. What's that? There's the transcendental love for Sita, and then there's the teaching something to others. There's the feelings of love and separation. Vipralamba bhav specifically is the language. So when Sita was gone, he is the Supreme Lord. He arranged for Sita to be separated from him, so he could have feelings of separation. It's an ecstatic emotion. It intensifies love when there's separation and feelings of separation. Like, the gopis and Krishna, there's separation. Or Krishna left Vrindavan. He was having, perfectly perfect loving exchanges, and then he left. And he's the Supreme Lord. Why didn't he go back? And there's different explanations of why he didn't go back, but he eventually went back. But one of the reasons he didn't go back, there's many, but if he went back, the remaining demons on earth would know that he has affection for the Brijbasis, and they'd go harass the Brijbasis. So he went back after he killed the demons. Then he went back. And then when he went back, their worldly, it's for 2 months, and the worldly pastimes, Prakat Lila, were completed. And so they entered into their aprakat stage, and those that had joined from the heavenly planets or the spiritual world, he returned them to the heavenly planets in the spiritual world. Pastimes over. Because the pastimes were in Vrindavan were up till 11 years, 8 months, and then back again after he had been in Dwarka and so forth. and that little interlude where they go meet one another in Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse. So those are his worldly pastimes with the residents of Vrindavan. And as short as they were, they're certainly talked about a lot, written about a lot. They're very celebrated. But so back to this. He gives instructions, which is one of his functions. There's 3. Pritranaya Saudanam Vinashaya Chaduskritam Dharma Sangstapanartaya. 3. Protect the devotees, annihilate the miscreants, and restore Dharma. 3. So he didn't do the restoring Dharma part. There were lots of demoniac kings, and he had to restore Dharma. So Ram is doing the same. He's establishing principles of Dharma, and one of them is undue attachment is problematic. But there's the internal, there's a secondary meaning, or a primary meaning. Teaching is secondary, you could say, and that's his love for Sita. It's eternal. And there's a pastime of manifesting that eternal love, and sometimes it's union and sometimes it's separation. Sambhoga vipralamba, coming together, separating. Varieties of love. So he's performing a pastime where there's varieties of loving exchange with Sita. And it looks like something else. Part of the something else is giving some teaching. This is this second meeting. Stories of the Lord give benefit to all types of people. Jiva Goswami's comment. Therefore, Ram's kama, lust or desire, was composed only of intense priti for his beloved. This is not a fault. This form is described in the following. This is now from 10th canto's Krishna's pastimes. Although fully satisfied within himself, Krishna enjoyed with his pleasing wives, and like an ordinary husband, he carried out his household duties. He didn't need anything. He's fully satisfied within. And at the same time, he enjoys loving exchanges, and they had a certain regard of love for him, and so he engaged in activities of pleasing his wives, as if, externally, as if an ordinary fellow. And he carried out his duties as if an ordinary fellow. Now here's from the Rasa Leela chapter 33. With gopis firmly attached to him, with anurag, Krishna, whose desires are always pure, who had fixed in his mind enjoyment with them, as he was doing with the cowherd boys or with any of the residents of Vrindavan, his life, we're going to hear this tomorrow morning, like very strongly. It's just giving bliss to his devotees. So that's what he was doing. He served by the nights lit with the rays of the moon, all the nights which give shelter to the poetic topics or rasa in autumn. The Lord shows indifference, but not to the devotees. And here he quotes, Jiva Goswami quotes Bhagavad Gita, 9:29 Bhagavad Gita. You know the verse? Samoham. Ye bhajanti tamam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham. And his translation here, I am equal to all living beings. I do not hate anyone, nor do I favor anyone, but those who worship me with devotion are in me, and I am in them. So he shows indifference, but not to the devotee. There's the Paramatma feature and there's the Bhagavan feature. In Paramatma feature, he's neutral. But those who show him love, he reveals his Bhagavan feature. And to that, looks like he's showing partiality. He's just reciprocating with their love. That's what he does. That's who he is. Continuing. In manifesting pastimes, where he is absorbed in human actions with intense prema for his devotees, sometimes the Lord shows bewilderment, contrary to his omniscience. But that is a very good quality. It's not a fault, since it bestows happiness of priti to the wise, for his bewilderment supports the sweetness of his pastimes. He accepts this bewilderment by his will. And here's an example from our chapter 10, 12, 25, and 26. Translation. This is the Aghasura story. Krishna, full of all powers, who is situated as Antaryami in the core of everyone's heart, heard the boys talking falsely among themselves like ignorant people, considering that truly a snake was beautifying Braja, and knowing moreover that it was a Rakshasa, he wanted to prevent them from entering the demon's mouth. And then the next verse, the moment he desired to stop them, all the coward boys along with the calves entered the stomach of the demon. The demon, however, did not swallow them, for he was thinking of his relatives, because he had a brother and sister. Aghasura's sister was Putana, and his brother was Bakasura. So thinking of his relatives who had been killed by Krishna, he was just waiting for Krishna to enter his mouth. We're almost done. Last reference is from chapter 13, which comes after this chapter. And it's the Brahma has taken the calves and the cowherd boys, and Krishna becomes bewildered. He who was omniscient becomes bewildered. Thereafter, when Krishna was unable to find the calves, he returned to the bank of the river, but there he was also unable to see the cowherd boys. Thus he began to search for both the calves and the boys, everywhere in the forest. Krishna enjoys getting bewildered and then unbewildered. The bewilderment energy is the Yogamaya energy. It's the same Yogamaya energy that when Mother Yasoda looked inside Krishna's mouth and she saw the entire universe is inside Krishna's mouth, because it is. The totality of everything is within him. Not just a universe, everything. So he just showed her part of everything. And then she was stunned. And then she started considering, what did I just see, and who is he, and so forth. And then the Yogamaya potency covered her. She forgot everything. And so forth. Yogamaya acts on his dear devotees, and Yogamaya will sometimes act on Krishna, of course, according to his will. When he saw the cows and the cowherd boys by the side of the Kaliya lake, they looked as if dead. He's omniscient, but he was bewildered by his own Yogamaya. And then the Yogamaya was withdrawn, and he knew what to do. He glanced over them, they came back to life again. So part of his all-powerfulness is his own Yogamaya, which sometimes bewilders him, and he likes it. He likes it when Mother Yasoda scolds him. Most children don't like it. And when she doesn't scold him, he'll escalate his naughtiness. So she'll scold him. And when she scolds him, she just smiles. But he likes it. It's part of the affection of parenting is sometimes being strong when you have to be, when it requires it. So when he was stealing, she couldn't reprimand him. But when he ate dirt, oh, come here. Mothers can't let their child eat dirt. I didn't eat dirt, they're lying. Open your mouth. And it's just the as we heard, the pastimes just flow from one to the next. That was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description of Krishna's Nitya Lila. It's just like a river. And who knows what the next wave is going to be on a river, but it's going to be a wave, and it's going to be whatever it's going to be. And it just keeps flowing. In Krishna's pastimes, they keep flowing with all variegatedness, and the main essence, particularly in Vrindavan, is giving bliss to his devotees. That's the Madhurya feature, the sweetness feature. And the other things are there too. It's part of the variegatedness of happiness. We just read a little section in the morning class about Krishna's pastimes being eternal. It's pretty fascinating to think of an activity that's eternal. I mean, it's unthinkable, in short. Because any activity that we know, it requires time. And, as time passes, the activity takes place. Okay. So I think I mentioned this when I was here last time. We're in the room together. Before we were in the room together, we were somewhere else, and when we're done, we're going to go somewhere else. But now we're here together. So that's you need time for activities. So what's an activity that's timeless or eternal? It has no beginning, it has no end. But it's an activity. It's unthinkable. By the material mind, it just doesn't fit. When something doesn't fit in your mind, what do? You throw your hands up in the air. And that's Krishna's pastimes are eternal. So it's a nice discussion. I won't redo the discussion. It's very detailed, very interesting, very thoughtful. But the conclusion is his pastimes are eternal. Nitya Lila. And one can get a sense of them only through the medium of service to him. It's a way of connecting with what's beyond time and space. So we know things within the three-dimensional space and time as we know it, past, present, future. That's the reality that we have. With imperfect senses, we're not even perceiving that properly. But that's the reality that we have. And then there's another reality that is the basis and support of this, which is illusion. Really, it's a big paradigm shift, major, and or pastimes are eternal. I mean, even when I was reading it, I was thinking, there are 8 phases of the day, but that's passage of time. And how do you have eternal through? This was a question. It was asked a couple times in our classes. How do you have eternal? Eternal in Krishna Loka is eternal. Okay, that's like abstract. But how do you have eternal in temporal? Because it looked like passage of time. I mean, Krishna appeared and he stayed for 125 years and he disappeared. And in between, stuff happened. And how is it eternal? How does it work with the temporal? It defies logic and reason. Or to say it the other way, logic and reason cannot enter into that mystery. That which lies beyond the senses can't be understood by the senses. Adhokshaja is one of the names of Krishna, he who is beyond the senses. Akshaja and Adhokshaja. You can't perceive he who is beyond the senses. And yet we're supposed to be engaged in using our senses to serve he who is beyond the senses. Yato bhakti radhoksaje. Savai punksang paro dharmo yato bhakti radhoksaje. Ahaitukiya pratyata yatma suprasidati. We're supposed to use our senses to serve he who is beyond the senses. How do you do that? I mean, the whole thing is a mystery. The mystery is solved, according to Bhagavatam, by the mystery of bhakti. The mystery of bhakti that's that connecting link with the realm of transcendence through the connection of loving service. And when there's genuine loving service, Krishna discloses, I'm like this. And otherwise, it remains a mystery. And if it remains a mystery, then all we're left with is illusion. And it's not, we make the best use of the illusion. We try unlimited ways of adjusting things to make it, a nice illusion. But it's not reality. And how to connect with that reality, how to understand it. There's a really nice verse that I was hearing Prabhupada speak. It's from a class in Canto 1, Chapter 2, these early verses of understanding the science of bhakti. And he quoted a verse by Rupa Goswami that starts Bhakti Rasa something. I was going to ask you to print it out for me. I'd like to learn the verse. Because Prabhupada said, I gave the name Krishna consciousness from that verse. And in the verse, it speaks of two things. It speaks of the standard or the stage of genuine devotion is rarely achieved. And the genuine devotion standard is to be very eager. I mean, the Sanskrit word is lolyam, which means greed, but he was speaking of it as eagerness. Really strong eagerness to become re-established in one's relationship with Krishna. That's the price. That's bhakti. So the principle of bhakti is to want to please Krishna. And the eagerness to want to please Krishna that's the relationship. It's the relationship of love. It's the opposite of selfishness. It's selflessness. With their selflessness, it's about someone. And with Krishna's that object, it's selfless love. And if one wants to be established in that selfless love with Krishna, and there's eagerness for that, that's the price. And then that resolves the mystery. Then Krishna discloses, it's like somebody that you have a close relationship with. Say within a family or outside the family, a friend or something. When you see there's a trustworthy person, there's more of a tendency to disclose personal things. And you don't disclose personal things to persons who are not trustworthy. But when someone is trustworthy, you're very comfortable sharing And so Krishna discloses his personality, what he's like, his qualities, his form, his everything, to those who extend this eagerness to be in that relationship with him. It's very sensible. That's bhakti. The price is eagerness. And I was thinking about this in relation to the question you asked the other day about performing some services, and it can become mechanical. So, the answer I gave is the solution is bhakti. Now it's even more specific. It's eagerness for the relationship. So here's an activity. It's like, what you do in the kitchen, or what you do in the workplace, or what you do when you go to school, or preparing for your career, or whatever stage things are in. There's the worldly motivation to do all those things. And then there's the transcendental motivation to do all those things. And bhakti means just to put the transcendental motivation and energize it. Like, not artificially or cosmetically, because then it'll fizzle. It won't sustain. But as that aspiration or eagerness, clarity grows and becomes clearer and clearer, Krishna sees and Krishna reciprocates, and you feel that connection. That's a bhakti life, whether it's in the workplace or in the kitchen or in this classroom or whatever. It's bhakti life. And then the connection with Krishna is palpable. And it grows. At least, the potential is there. The invitation from Krishna through disciplic succession is, please take it. Your relationship with Krishna, please take it. Please enter into it. And the eagerness to enter into it, that's the price. And then that which is like very mysterious starts to be clear. And otherwise it just remains mysterious. I shared this topic the other day, and I've been involved in it a little bit since the other day, so I'll just say it again. Cosmology. Cosmology is important for several reasons. One, there's this whole TOVP. When it comes up, people are going to say, what's that? Because it doesn't match the material picture. And there are certain things within modern cosmology that's observable. Or at least there's a way to explain something that's observable. And one of those things is precession. You know what the term precession means? When a top spins, it doesn't just go like this, it goes around and around and around. So the modern science says Earth is tilted on an axis 23.5 degrees, and as the Earth spins, there's the movement of the axis of the Earth that looks like this. That's called precession. And there's something to do with, in the course of a period of time, it's that the axis of the Earth is identifying the pole star, and all the heavenly bodies are moving around the pole star. It's similar to the Vedic model. But it shifts a little bit over a period of 25,800 years. It's no longer the pole star, it's going to be another one. That's a long period of time. But that's what the modern astronomy says. I forget the name of the other one. It's another nice name. Greek name. However, Vedic cosmology says explicitly something else. and that explicit something else is the pole star is always the pole star. It doesn't change from this one to that one. It says specifically, to the end of this universe, the pole star is in its place. So, without going into it, because it gets really technical, Prabhupada's, hand on the desk firmly saying, whatever modern science says, we stand by the Vedic conclusion. So I brought this question to the person in charge of the TOVP. How does precession fit in with Vedic cosmology? And he gave a really detailed answer. That there's another model. I forget the language of the model, but it's very clear that he understands it. I don't understand it because I'm just beginning in this whole thing. But what the Bhagavatam says is right. What Prabhupada said we should accept is right, and here's the explanation of model. It doesn't mean that the model, the 23.5 degree tilt of the Earth and so forth, is a wrong. It's just a different model of explaining things by observable events and data and so forth. It's Stanford University. I was giving a class one time on, I'll come back to Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, but I was giving a class, a similar topic on Sariputa's Mysteries of the Sacred Universe, and to describing what he wrote in his book. And one of the things that I shared is the Vedic model is geocentric, and the modern model is heliocentric. So somebody asked the question, which is it? And I said, it's just relative motion. Einstein's theory of relativity. It's relative. You can make the same calculations from an Earth perspective, or you can make the same calculation from the Sun perspective. And it's just different equations. You put in the numbers, you get the same answer. It's just a different perspective. And he didn't like the answer. He said, well, it's got to be either this or that. He said, is it a wave or is it a particle? That's 8th grade science now these days. Which is it? It's got to be either a wave or a particle. So there are different ways of getting from where we are to where we want to go. You get your GPS. That's one way. And then another way is you send a message to Google or Yahoo, and they'll give you the directions. You turn left or right. Or another one is you can get out a street map and just follow the street map. Or there's another one is you can get out a globe and trace your map. So, the three-dimensional ways of getting to the place you want to go. And it's like if this one's right, then that one's wrong. There are different ways of looking at the same thing. It's not a problem. Anyway. But as far as that's just things that are of this world. But the Vedic model of this world, it's a model that everything begins with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's resting upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is what it looks like in between creation and annihilation. And it's perfect. And you can have another one that has a different way of explaining the same thing. I don't see there's a problem. I mean, so what to speak of then understanding transcendence? How are you going to understand transcendence? What's beyond the senses to perceive? How are you going to understand an eternal pastime? How are you going to understand the soul? How are you going to understand who you are? You're not going to understand it with your modern paraphernalia, mind and senses, and your ability to reason. You can't get there. What to speak of the soul's connection to everything, the source of everything. You can't. So what are you going to do? Just shrug your shoulders and go on with illusion, I guess. That's one option. Or live in a world that operates by rules of illusion, and you just navigate your way in practical manner while you're cultivating an understanding of transcendence in the course of your life, because that's the human mission, transcendence. Perform your prescribed duty and always think of me. Not trash your prescribed duty and just think of Krishna. Or just perform your prescribed duty and trash thinking of Krishna. That's not human life, that's animal life. So understanding transcendent, understanding Krishna and his quality and his name and his form and his pastimes and his loving dealings, it's part of remembering Krishna. It's part of life's mission. And we won't understand it by our little faculties, mind and senses. We need another methodology. And that's the bhakti methodology. It elevates consciousness and it helps us understand things that are otherwise perplexing. Any discussion? Got a little carried away. Sorry about that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It is said that 1,000 names of Vishnu equals 1 name of Krishna, and 3 names of Rama is equal to 1 name of Krishna. My question is, when you say name of Krishna, is it the name Krishna only? Or as you mentioned, there are different potencies in Krishna's different names. So is it just the name Krishna only or any names of Krishna?
Nice question. Names of Krishna that indicate the Swayam Bhagavan Krishna or Krishna in Krishna Loka, like Govinda. Same. So names that indicate Krishna in Krishna Loka, the Swayam Bhagavan, the origin of all forms. Names that indicate that, yes, same. And there are other names of Krishna like Janardana, the Lord of the Heart. It's not the same. Is it clear? Should I say it differently? There's a distinction between the example given in Brahma Samhita is taking one candle, kind of like it's done in Diwali or in Govardhan Puja, and in Vrindavan when it's the month of Damodar. They bring from the altar one lamp, and it stays lit through the whole month. They bring that lamp, and from that lamp they light up lamps that everyone can offer to Damodar. And then, but by the end of the evening, the temple was filled with lamps. But amongst all those lamps, there's one that goes back on the altar. And that's the lamp from which the others are lit. So using the same idea or metaphor, similarly, there's one source of all avatars or all expansions. The language is avatari. So the name Krishna indicates the avatari. So names that indicate the avatari that has special potency. And then there's avatars from the avatari or expansions. And then there's even expansions of those expansions. And those expansions of those expansions don't manifest the fullness of the original candle, or the original avatari, the original source. They exhibit something, a portion. Then it's what they exhibit, not what their capacity is. So your question specifically is in that comparison. And do you want the scriptural references? I can provide them for you. Where in Scripture it says what you just said? Is that just something that people made up, or is it something that's in Scripture? It's something that's in Scripture. Huh? Okay. Okay. There's several places. Yes. Yeah. And that's right in Vishnu Sahasranam. Okay. So now your question, okay, good. There's other references besides that one that says the same thing. Is it Krishna's name only, or any of the other names of Krishna? And I'm trying to make the distinction that when we speak of names of Krishna, it could mean, like using this one, Yogeshwara, like he's addressed by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 1. So those are names that are addressing Krishna, but that's not the avatari feature. It's a potency of him. He's the master of all mystic powers, or he's the master of the senses, or something. Parameshwara. He's the Ishwar of all Ishwaras. So it's a position. It's not the origin of everything. So the origin of everything is specifically in Goloka Vrindavan, or Krishna Loka. And there are names that identify Krishna and Krishna Loka. And then they have the same potency. There's something to do with the Sanskrit of the name Krishna, the all-attractive, etc. But it's, the names that indicate that person, Gopal, Govinda. Okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. I had a question about Buddha.
About?
Buddha.
Buddha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Buddha is Krishna himself, but then why did he preach to not believe in the soul?
Well, two things. It's not that Buddha was silent on the soul. He didn't say there isn't one. He didn't say there is one. There are brands of Buddhism that say there is one. There are brands of Buddhism that say there isn't one. But he was silent.
Is it true that he said he didn't believe in religion? And if so, why did he preach that?
Why did he preach the things that he did preach, is your question. Because he was silent on the soul. Time, place, and circumstance. He was dealing with a set of people that had gone off the road into the ditch. They were taking the Vedas, and in the name of the Vedas, engaging in slaughter of animals. So he pulled back on that. If the Vedas say you can take the life of an animal, I reject the Vedas. So he did what he did because people were abusing in the name of the Vedas. They were doing bad stuff. So I reject the Vedas. And instead, I'm going to establish teachings, and the teachings included be nonviolent. Don't harm animals. But we just read, appreciating living entities. If one isn't, then there's not love of God. So people had deviated from love of God. So at least, standards of goodness, So a lifestyle of goodness. The Eightfold Teachings of Buddha are goodness and goodness and goodness and goodness and goodness, and eight goodnesses. And then one of those is compassion, so you don't kill animals. So a life of goodness without reference to the Vedas. And part of the reason for that was people were deviating from the Vedas, but also to make way for this age where people, if you just put, the God word in the front, they're going to go the other way. So he just took it out for people of this age so they could at least move towards goodness. And aspire for, spirituality. And what is spirituality? Well, the word is right in 6th chapter Bhagavad Gita. And you'll find nirvana, which means cessation of material activity. But he doesn't describe the positive activity of the soul because he doesn't even talk about the soul. He just talks about nirvana.
Thank you, Maharaj.
It's for people of this age. They weren't ready to, And it worked.
Thank you, Maharaj. Wait, sorry.
Huh?
Sorry, did you ask something? I didn't hear that.
Oh, you're satisfied with the answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's nothing wrong with asking the question. It's a good question. I mean, he's an incarnation of Krishna. Why did he reject the Vedas? And why didn't he say, Krishna, Krishna?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is, somewhere it said material world is inverted reflection of a spiritual world. Somehow I was not able to understand that concept. So can you elaborate on that?
It's a very important concept.
I thought about that because when you said the negativity tinted reflection,
Yeah.
is it one and the
Yeah.
same or is it different?
Reflection of the apple. So there's the spiritual world is substance, and this is the reflection of the substance. It's a reflection. It's not substantial. You read in the first purport of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, and you'll find that substance and category Prabhupada uses. That's English terms. There's sat and there's asat. And the asat is just a reflection of sat. Or it's something that Prabhupada would say in the West a lot, because people from the West know something about the Bible. So as man is created in the image of God. So there's the image and then there's the creation. It's in the image of. It's a reflection of. It's in the likeness of. But here it's just it's an imitation of the real thing.
But it is not opposite, right?
It's a reflection. It's not opposite. It's just a reflection.
Okay. But why it is called inverted? Oh, it's okay. Reflection is inverted.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the usual term is the perverted. So if there's some wind blowing and it's making some ripples in the water, when you look at the reflection, it's kind of distorted or perverted. A distorted or perverted reflection. And sometimes it looks like, that the tree is getting big, and sometimes like it's getting skinny or getting long. It's, but the image is there because the real thing is there. And then there's the reflecting surface, the lake. So here the reflecting surface is the mind. The mind is carrying the image of reality, but it's a distorted image of reality. So we're accepting illusion to be reality, and reality to be illusion. Or I don't know. Or, I'm an agnostic. I can't say. Or it doesn't exist. I'm an atheist. But that's just in the mind.
You're just saying that it is not real. So that is the meaning of
Well, there's something there. When you have an image in your mind, there's something. It's not, let's say, you have a dream. And there's something going on in your dream, but it's not reality. Supposing it's like a bad dream, and you wake up and you're screaming, and you're perspiring, your heart is. It wasn't a tiger after all. But your heart is beating, and you're perspiring, and you're maybe crying or calling out, "Help!" and something's going on, but it's not reality. It's illusion. But there's something. And it's a reflection, a distorted reflection of ultimate reality. So how do we get in touch with ultimate reality, please? And that's what yoga is, linking with the ultimate reality. And there are different types and stages of yoga and yoga realization and connecting with reality beyond the limits of the mind and senses. So the reflection is what's going on in the mind. And then from the mind, then we create things. Like I'm sitting in a chair. So before there was a chair, there was an idea. Right? And then, voila. Some passage of time and some effort and this and that, and there's a chair. Everything in this world comes from something subtle. Before the gross is the subtle. And before the subtle is the spiritual. But we're so absorbed in the gross manifestation, the reflection, that we're not checking out where this reflection is coming from, and why does it have misery? Why isn't it nice? I want nice, not misery. And there is such a thing. We want it because there is such a thing. We want happiness because there is happiness. It's our nature. But we're looking in the wrong places. That's the reflection.
This question is a rephrased question from the other day about illusion versus reality mentioned in Matrix. That one.
You know what matrix is, right? Yeah. Okay. Huh? I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it either, but I've been asked, she's making reference to it. I've been asked to speak about it in colleges. I've not seen it either, but the poster that advertises it is a guy that has two hands. All you just see is hands, and there's a red pill and a blue pill. Because the Matrix guy says, which do you want, reality or illusion? And of course they say they want reality, not illusion. And then the reality is scary. So that's the reference. Go ahead.
So the question from Chandana Mataji is, why is reality not nicer than illusion when we are striving to get out of illusion?
It is nicer. But the reality of the illusion is not nicer. Jamna mrityu jara vyadi dukkha doshana darshanam. That's not nice. We bought into illusion, and the reality is the illusion is not nice. Or yehi samsparshaja boga dukkha yonaya evate, which means you want happiness and you get distress. I don't want to acknowledge I'm getting distressed because I wanted happiness. I want happiness. But the reality is, if we're striving for happiness independent of the source of everything, we're going to get distress. That's the reality. That's not very pleasing, because I bought into the program. I got a lot of shares in that stock. I bought a used car, and you're telling me it's a bad deal, huh? I got a broken model. You have to put a lot of money into this broken model. That's not good news. It's a path of misery. The reality is, material existence is a path of misery. That's the reality pill. Now there's the transcendental reality, and that's nice.
And there are two questions from Sanchari Mataji from Houston. First one is, I'm thinking about the Samadarshana verse and how you also stated that kindness does not mean that one should go and hug a tiger. The pure devotee, as I understand, sees the soul in all situations. So even though in a particular form there may cause severe hardship, the pure devotee understands the situation on the platform of the soul.
Yes.
Therefore, true forgiveness occurs.
Yes.
Samadarshana is a goal, a high goal. However, for one who is at the beginning stages, what should Samadarshana look like? How do we balance discernment and kindness in a way that pacifies the hurt ego and keeps pushing one forward on the path of devotional service?
You don't have to. If your program is pacifying the hurt ego, you're stuck. You're not going to make much progress. So you just move to another. Hit the pause button, the ego pause button, and say, that's not really me. Any more than the other person is the covering over the soul. I'm not the covering of the soul either. So in the beginning stage, that's the question. The beginning stage, you have to. The discerning capacity has to go towards the spiritual conception of life. And in the beginning, there isn't a spiritual conception of life. There's the material conception of life. But so at least in the beginning, there has to be some faith, preliminary faith. You've heard this from me many times. There is a higher reality. 3 things in the beginning. There is a higher reality. 2, I don't know what that higher reality is. 3, I'd like to know what that higher reality is. That's what you do in the beginning. And then you hear from Bhagavad Gita and other standard texts, this is what that higher reality is. And you can't understand it because you're not there yet. But you have some faith, so that's what you do in the beginning. In faith, you engage in sadhu sangha and bhajana kriya. That is, you associate with spiritually minded persons, and you engage in activities of discussing spiritual topics, even though you don't understand it yet, and you're still in the bruised ego platform. You're not there yet. You're not in the Samadarshana stage yet. But you have faith, and you're engaged in hearing and discussing and trying to understand that reality which you know exists, but you don't yet understand it. That's what you do. And yet that's cleansing to it cleanses the coverings of the soul and permits some light to come in. And when that little light comes in, it's refreshing. It's uplifting. It feels the there's some relief from the position of darkness. And you keep going because there's light. So you keep going. That's what you do in the beginning.
And her second question is, we hear that the rope was tied around Krishna's stomach in the Damodar pastime. And Mother Kunti prays Namaste Pankajangre. And Lord Brahma rests on a lotus which originates from the navel of the Lord. Why is that particular feature of Krishna given so much importance?
Which particular feature? His abdomen? Well, in the prayer of Queen Kunti, it's not just his abdomen. It's his legs and his waist and his head and his feet. They're all featured. And the abdomen, as far as I can understand, it's just a standard way where mothers that want to tie up their child, that's where they tie them. They don't tie them around the neck. Excuse me. That's it?
Guru Maharaj, it's about the bruised ego, the Sanchari Mata's question. I'm thinking in terms of the needs. Like it is clear. I mean, it looks like. I mean, I'm understanding. Maybe it's a subtle body. So through connecting to the transcendence, we can go. But there is also physical needs. Like not having enough food, rest, things like that. So just trying to see where the needs fit into the picture, Guru Maharaj. Like when one is hungry, tired, it helps them better come to transcendence when those lower needs are taken care. So is that the right direction?
I hope you understand your question because I don't. We have needs, but it's not that there's no denial. I'm not sure why you're asking. I'm not sure what you're asking or why you're asking what you're asking, because there's not a denial of needs. It's just while taking care of physical, mental, and intellectual needs, don't neglect the soul, because everything's resting on the soul. Does that address your question?
Yeah.
It's a holistic picture of the package.
Okay. I understood, like getting to the transcendence takes care. We don't need to worry about the lower ones.
I don't know if I said that.
It's my understanding. Thank you.
Anything further?
Maharaj, I was thinking about the past life of Aghasura, and I wanted to just clarify if my understanding is correct. So, in his past life, he had pride and he kind of acted or offended a sadhu.
Yes.
And so when one offends the sadhu, then their anarthas become more exaggerated. Is that why he got these demons?
Well, he was cursed to become a serpent. It's not just, he wasn't karmic. It was more. It was stronger. It's not too terribly dissimilar from the serpent Vidyadhara serpent that was swallowing Nanda, but his situation wasn't as bad, apparently, as Agga's was, because the serpent, as soon as the serpent was just touched by the feet of Krishna, by left foot of Krishna, immediately his body transformed. So that his evil disposition was much less, and the consequence was much less. The mitigation was much easier. Okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. We were discussing 10 offensive ways or 10 offenses of chanting. And one of the offenses Mataji mentioned is using chanting for fruitive chanting.
Okay.
And going back to your physical needs, sometimes your body is tired, and you're fasting for 2 continuous days, and I mean for Janmashtami and Vyasa Puja. So and while you're trying to perform services, I don't know if it is offensive. Sometimes when you think you are establishing a connection with Krishna, and it is said that when you love somebody, you hurt them also the most. So I don't know, is it an offense when you sometimes you take Krishna for granted, like Krishna, I'm very tired today, probably I'm not able to do in the same intensity as the other days. So I don't know if
That's okay. That's not offensive. That was her question. It was not verbatim her question, but it was the same question. It's not offensive. It says, when there's hills and there's valleys, that the sine curve of bhakti goes up and down. Unsteady bhakti goes like that. So it's not that you've been invited into a process that's going to guarantee you're going to make offenses because sometimes you're down. That's not the way it is. So don't worry like that. You strive, and to your capacity. That's what you do. And if your capacity sometimes is way up here, great. Sometimes your capacity is somewhere in between, fine. Sometimes it's down, okay. But you're not complacent wherever you are. You're wishing to take another step. We do that in life with anything. So you do it in the life of bhakti too. It's not offensive. Just that, I have to be honest with my present moment to moment situation, and right now I'm down. I'm not. And you accept that, and okay, what's a step that I can take in the right direction? Okay. It's part of the reconciliation that goes in the life of earlier stages of bhakti, or even not exactly earlier stages, but the progressive stages of bhakti is contending with your own judgments of yourself. You're not being judged by Krishna, so don't judge yourself. You just be in your relationship as your capacity permits. Just like you said, when you're close to some people, you can be hurt and hurt them more than when people that are way over there. So you're getting close to Krishna. Krishna's not judgmental. Don't judge yourself.
Yeah, sometimes I feel guilty that you're neglecting him. You're not doing.
Well, turn that negative emotion into a positive one. I can do. And when does that stage come that you've done everything that you can do? There's always more. So if I'm in a down position, or I'm not strong, or whatever it is, and I could be doing So what's something more that I can do from this present situation? And it can be so weak, like I don't know if I can do much of anything. Okay. But, even in that, there's a thought of, I want to be in my relationship with Krishna, and I'm weak right now. And Krishna knows. So you express that, or you feel that feeling, instead of guilt. And acceptance and progress is the term. And I am where I am. And that's where I am. Not like, too bad, Krishna. It's just between myself and Krishna. He knows, and I'm acknowledging before Krishna, this is where I am. And I wish to take a step in a direction and show Krishna really, that's my capacity right now, and I'm taking the step that I can take. And you do that. It turns the negative emotion into a positive step. Acknowledgement, acceptance, and progress is the term. We had a whole weekend in our farm community in Pennsylvania, a retreat on that theme, acceptance and progress, and everybody spoke on that topic from their perspective. And
Thank you, Maharaj.
you might want to listen to those recordings. He can send them to you. Acceptance and progress. It's nice. Self-honesty doesn't have to result in a negative emotion. It can just be acknowledgement. 3 deep breaths, and then what's a step that's doable? And even you may say, okay, that's a doable step, and you don't do, I didn't do. Beat myself up a few times, and then, that doesn't help anything. It's just, again, look to your relationship with Krishna. A nice example that's given in Nectar Devotion I like a lot. Although I haven't had a child in my life, but children have a walking propensity. And the stage where the child is learning to walk, there's lots of tumbling. But because the walking propensity is within, after effort, after effort, after effort, with a little assistance from mother holding the child's finger or something, then they can learn to walk. It's just a motor skill, and it's already innate. So devotional propensity is already there, and it will come out just practice and some tumbling, and get up and practice again, some more tumbling, and because it's natural, not something artificial. It's something that's already within. Just needs some practice, and it comes out. As with motor skills, so also with spiritual strength. So right now I'm not so strong. That's okay. Practice.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And don't beat yourself up. Don't get into that space that I'm feeling guilty, I'm bad, I'm unworthy, or something like that. That doesn't help. That's it? Okay, thank you. Prabhupada ki jai. Ooh, it's 8:30.